Okay, so I just handed out this sheet to you. Okay, it's just basic review. Okay, so amplitude and period. So any graph that repeats itself, so any graph that has a repeating pattern is called periodic. Okay, so any graph that has a repeating pattern is called periodic. Any graph that has the wave pattern is called sinusoidal. But that's the difference. A periodic function is just a graph with a repeating pattern. Sinusoidal is a repeating graph that has a wave pattern. Okay? So for this graph, what's the amplitude? What's the period? So how far up? How far down? So how far up, how far down? 17. And it's always going to be a positive 17 because it's the distance. Okay? Now, if you don't like looking at it like that, the other option you could do is to say, okay, what is the total length that this function covers? Well, it covers a distance of 34 units. You just go 34 divided by 2, and you get out 17. That's the other way you can do it, is total distance divided by 2. Okay, so period is the length of the pattern. Okay, so from here to here took 15, whether it's 50, let's just say 15 seconds, okay? So how far should it take from here to here? Another 15. How far should it take from here to here? And then how far should it take from here to here? So one complete pattern is up, down, up. That's one complete pattern. So how much space did that take? 60. So that's the period. So period is the length of space it takes for the pattern to go through. Okay? Now, what if we apply this to the sine equation? So give the amplitude and period to the nearest tenth of this sinusoidal function. So the number in front, this is always the amplitude. However, you have to write it as positive 0.1 because it's the distance that it goes through. Now, this number inside, this is what we call our B value. So on your formula sheet, you are given this formula. It says period equals 2 pi over B. And this is the B value. So you're going to go 2 pi divided by 0.5. So if you left it as an exact number, 2 divided by 0.5 is 4, and then you just stick the pi on the end. Or if you actually punched it into the calculator and gave the nearest tenth, it's like, is it 12 point something or 13 point something, or just go 4 times, go 2 times pi divided by 0.5. So 12.6. Okay? So in other words, that wave, so if I just use my little picture up here, from start to finish, that wave took 12.6 units to go from start to finish. Okay. And then the amplitude would be how far up it went and how far down it went. That's the 0.1. Okay. Okay. So if we look at determining the equation of this thing, so it says using exact values of A and B. So when you see the word exact value, typically that means for the B, it's going to have a pi in it because you don't want to round any decimals on your calculator. So option number 1. So you recognize that this is the halfway line. You're going up 15 and down 15 from that line. Or you could be like, okay, I've covered 30 units of space. So half of that, my amplitude would be 15. Okay, either one. So my equation is that so far. So the next part of it now is to find the B value. So the B value is tricky, which is why it's going to be on your diploma. This is a guaranteed question on the diploma is the B value. So they'll either give you the B value and ask you for the period, or they'll give you the period and you have to find the B value. Either one of those is a guaranteed question on the diploma. Okay, so same idea as the first one. From here to here is 10. So then how far is it from here to here? 10. How far is it from here to here? Another 10, because 10 plus 10 plus 10 is 30. So how far to here to here? So the whole thing, 40. So the period is 40. Now, I need to find the B value. So all you have to do, I'm just going to change my view here. All you have to do is take this formula here, and you're just going to swap these two around. So you're going to write B equals 2 pi over period. You're just going to swap those two. So it's going to be 2 pi divided by 40. So the question wanted exact values. So use your calculator. Go 2 divided by 40, math 1. And you will get out 1 over 20. And then you just stick the pi back in. Yes. Now, if the word exact values didn't appear, if it was just find me the value of A and B, your other option would be to plug this whole thing in on your calculator. So go 2 pi divided by 40, and you'll get out a 0 point something. And then you could leave it like that as well. Okay? So either one, you just have to look at what, if it's multiple choice, they're going to want exact, probably. I mean, I guess they could do it. Just look at the choices. If it's numeric response, then it will definitely be a rounded number because you can only put a maximum of 4 digits on a, yeah, okay? They would probably, if they don't say exact value, chances are, I'm guessing for long answer, they will say rounded to the nearest hundredth. So that way everybody has the same looking answer. Because it just makes, when you're marking 9,000 exams, it just makes it easier if you're looking at the same thing from everybody's. Because like in Math 30-1, we don't accept anything other than the exact answer. We never accept the approximate. But in 30-2, can go either way. So, okay. Do you guys have any questions on those two concepts? We talked about it last week, and then we took grad off, and then we talked about it yesterday. You okay with that? So yesterday, right at the end of class, we mucked with the midline. So the midline is this line right here that divides the amplitude into 2 equal sized chunks. So this thing is called the midline. And the midline, we have to deal with it first. So when we do muck around with the midline, that's the number we always have to mess with first, and then we do amplitude, and then we do B period last, okay? So that's what I want to focus on today with you, is mucking with that midline. So page 380 is where we're going to go. You write at the very, very bottom of page 380, okay? That was a big thud. Okay, so the midline, as an answer, it will always be y equals number. It's going to be a horizontal line that 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 divides your graph into two equal sized chunks. Okay? The midline is always, always, always this number here. It's always the very last thing that you see in your equation. So if it is plus 10, that means the midline went up to 10. So in other words, through 10. So the midline is y equals 10. So minus 4, this means the midline is down here at negative 4. So you just write it as y equals negative 4. Here, midline plus d. So that means the midline is up here at positive d. So when we deal with the midline, it's always the very first thing you do. So if you see a number on the end of the sine equation, and it's a plus or minus, just draw your picture out. Okay? Now, by this point, so, I got one more to do here. Sorry. Need to focus. So minus 4 means down 4. So negative 4. Okay? Maybe you don't have that one. Okay. Okay, well, we'll just focus on the first three. Okay, so the second part of the question, which I have added in, is what is the maximum and minimum value? So this is not part of your page 380. I have added this in. Okay? So maximum is another word for peak. Minimum is another word for valley. Okay? So peaks and valleys. So once you've dealt with the midline, the second thing that you want to do is deal with the amplitude. Now on all of these, I kept the amplitude the same. What number is in front of each one of these? 1, 1, 1. So what that means, it means from your midline, you're going to go up 1, down 1. From your midline, up 1, down 1. From your midline, up 1, down 1. So d plus 1, d minus 1. Now, what does the sine graph look like? It starts on the midline, and it goes swoop, 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 swoop. Does that make sense? So find your midline, and then go up and down the amplitude amount, and then go swoop and draw your little wave in. So I know part D is not in your notes, but here, this is your amplitude. Okay, that's your amplitude. So from negative 4, you're going to go up 4, so to 0, and down 4 to negative 8. So when I draw my swoopy in, you're going to go up to 0, down to negative 8, and then come back. Now, I'm not going to worry about period and all that stuff on this, but I just want to build on those two ideas. So move your midline, and then plot your amplitude in around it. Good? So on this one, we would say a maximum of 0, a minimum of negative 8. On this one, a maximum of 11, a minimum of 9. This one, a maximum of -3, a minimum of -5. Make sense? And that could be very well be the diploma exam question. It'll be a chart, so it'll have A, B, C, D, and across the top it will have maximum, minimum, and you just pick the right row that has the right numbers. The reason why this is a nice little diploma exam question is the only way to find the maximum and minimum is to understand midline and amplitude. So they can kill two birds with one simple little question. Right? Because you can't get out 0 and -8 if you don't understand where the midline and the amplitude are. Okay. Good? No one's saying no. Okay, so this is the top of the next page. So there is a formula. I'm not even going to show you the formula. It's just something else to memorize. And I find with 30-2, you guys would just rather understand it than just memorize because it's just too much to memorize. You've got to remember, we've had 7 large units in this course. There is things that you have to have memorized. But in times like this, you don't need to. So for the midline, whoops, I'm all caught up here. I'm going to do this first. Okay? So focus on that last number. So notice in this one, midline is the same on all of them. So the midline is going to be through 5. So if I just draw a picture over here, so through 5, that's the midline. Now, for the first one, there's a 1 in front of that sign. So that means you're going to go up 1, down 1. Well, what is going up 1? Well, the top would be at 6, the bottom would be at 4. Make sense? Well, what if it's a 4? So you're going to go up 4, down 4. Well, if the midline's at 5, if you go up 4, that would be 9. If you go down 4, that would be at 1. What if it's a 2? Well, you would go up 2 and down 2. So it would go from 7 to 3, or 3 to 7, however you want to think of it. And this one's the same thing. It's also a 2, so 7 to 3. Now, what those two numbers represent, they represent the range. So if you remember for range, and I don't think this is a question on here, but it's a guaranteed question. It's on my unit end, and it's probably going to be on the diploma. Okay. So if we just look at part C here, so if you change part C, if it asks you for the range of each one of these, so remember your formula for range. So you have to draw this thing in the middle. Remember, you have to draw in that inequality. And then the first number that you put in is the bottom. The second number you put in is the top, or in other words, minimum and maximum. So for the first one, what would the range be? It's all the y's from 4 to 6. For the second one, it's all the y's from 1 to 9. Bottom, top. For the third and fourth one, it's all the y's from 3 to 7. Yes, the order of the numbers matters. It's always bottom to top. So it's all the y's bigger than the bottom, but smaller than the top. Okay. Now, for me personally, um, I think with my eyes way more than my head. What I mean by that is if I can see it, it makes sense. Until I can see it in front of me, I can't get there. Like I can't quite imagine it. So if we look at this number 3 here, if this was a test question, I would literally do it like this. I'd go +5. I'd go up 2 and down 2. So I go 7 and 3, and then I go swoop. So my range is everything from 3 to 7. I would draw the picture. I wouldn't memorize a formula and all that. It's just an easier way to do it, in my opinion, because if you actually understand what the numbers mean, the math will take care of itself. Okay. Now, I will warn you, on the diploma, they will have 3-7, and then they will have another option that says 7-3. Okay, so just make sure you go 3-7, bottom to top. Questions on that? Still good? Okay, so here's our basic formulas. Again, if you want to have the formulas memorized, go for it. I personally don't like it. For the amplitude, I like to just think of it as half the total height. Hold on, that's not how you spell total. Or visually speaking, okay, the amplitude is this number here. Okay. Period is 2 pi over b, or you can swap them around and go 2 pi over period. Right? You can use either one. That's the only formula that I do use because you have to. Okay. Phase shift, don't worry about it. This is just the starting point. But for the most part, your starting point should all be 0, 0, or starting at 0. So our starting point here. So if I put a number in there, then it moves the starting point. So in other words, the phase shift moves the graph left and right. So it'll change the starting point of the curve. And then the midline, this is just the number on the end. And I always deal with it first. So I do that first, this second, and period B value third. So I don't worry about max minus min, max plus min. I don't bother with the formulas. I just make it visual for myself. And it just works easier that way. Okay, the reason why the formulas are in here is they literally copy and pasted this page from the 30-1 book. 30-1 kids, they're required to use the formulas because instead of being given numbers for the top and bottom, they'll do it in all letters. So then you're manipulating formulas with letters, not numbers, and it's way harder. Okay. Do you need a minute to catch up? Okay. Okay, so I haven't seen any phase shift questions on the diploma, but I figured, you know what, Murphy's Law, right? The one time I don't talk about it, lo and behold, there she is. So we'll briefly talk about this, but we're not going to focus on it by any means. Okay. So amplitude, actually, I'm going to do it in this order. So I'm going to stick to the first, second, third rule that I just said. So we're going to do midline first, and then we'll do the amplitude, and then we'll do the period. Okay. And I would like you to put a fourth one in there. I'd like you to do range. Okay. So we're on page 382. Yeah. Okay, so the midline. So the midline is just that number on the end. Okay, so the first one is +1. So that means the midline is up at 1. For part C, I'm just going to do them all the way across. The midline is up at 0.5. Okay, like I said, I did not see this on the diploma, but just so that we're safe, okay, there is a difference between writing this, okay, that is different than this. If something is in the brackets, the words we use is attached to sign. Okay, that plus number on the end or minus number on the end, that number is not attached. So another way to write this would be to put brackets like this to say it's only the x that's attached to sign. Here, again, only the x that's attached to sign. Usually the diploma will just put the brackets in there so you can clearly see what is attached to sign and what's not attached to sign. Okay, so when we're talking about what is attached versus what's not attached, the not attached is the number that's on the end. So in this one, there's no number on the end, so the midline is at 0, not -8. Because the -8 is attached inside the brackets. Like I said, I did not see anything remotely that hard on the diploma. The diploma was pretty much just straight up given the way the normal examples are. Okay. Amplitude, that's just the number in front. So the amplitude is 6. So what if there's no number in front? What's the assumed number? 1, yeah. And 0.5. Okay, so I'm just going to put these two thoughts together. So I'm going to go up to 1. So there's my midline. And from that, I'm going to go up 6 and down 6. So my range is everything from -5 to 7. Notice I haven't even talked about period yet. I'm just focusing on the top and the bottom. So here, my midline is at 0. I'm going to go up 1 and down 1. So my range goes from -1 to 1. Here, I'm going to go up 0.5. And then from that, I'm going to go up 0.5 and down 0.5. So it's going to be 1 to 0 or 0 to 1. Again, I think with my eyes. So I need that as a frame of reference. Because after that, what I'll then do is just go swoop, 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 like that. Okay? Period. So the formula for period is 2 pi over b. For this one, there is no number in front of the x. So what do we assume the b value is? 1. So that means my period is 2 pi. So in other words, it starts at 0, finishes at 2 pi. The length of the cycle is 2 pi. I'm going to go down to this guy next. Period is 2 pi over b. B is 0.5. So we already did this one in the last example. If you punch that into your calculator, I think we got 12.56. So that means from start to finish, It's 12.56. For this one, the number in front of the x is the b value. So that's 4. So if I punch that, so if I leave it as a fraction, it's 1/2 pi. I think it's 1.7 something if I punch it into my calculator. 1.57, I was close. So that means from start to finish, it's 1.57. Now, you're not going to get Part B as a diploma exam question because Part B has a phase shift. Do you see how there's another number inside that bracket? That's the phase shift. So in other words, this graph is wrong. It doesn't actually start at 0. It actually starts at 8. So it actually goes to 8. So it actually starts at 8. And then it does that. And then the length is 1.57. So it actually finishes at 9.57. That is way beyond you guys. And I'm actually lying to you. It doesn't even start at 8. It actually starts at 2. But I'm not even going to go there with you. Okay? It's because 8 divided by 4. You actually have to divide them. So that's Math 30-1. I'm simply saying that if you have a number inside this bracket that's not the b value, that's what we call the phase shift. The phase shift is the left-right starting point. So it changes the starting point. Doesn't change the midline, doesn't change the top, doesn't change the bottom, doesn't change the period. Just changes the starting point. Smile and nod and pretend you don't pretend. Just like change the starting point. Blech. That's all you need to know. Okay? Okay. So the other type of question you could get is instead of giving you the equation, we could give you the, and get, look, words are a struggle for me today. So I could give you the equation and you give me all the stuff. That's option 1. Option 2 is I give you the stuff, you give me the equation. Forwards, backwards. So amplitude of 3. Where does that number go? First. So we go 3 sine. Now, we'll leave the b value till the end. Midline is through positive 7. So we have to have a plus 7 on the end. Make sure that you put brackets around the x so you can see that it is on the end. Okay. So in your equation, this is A, this is B, this is what we call D. Period and B are not the same number. I am looking for B. The formula is 2 pi over period. So you got to go 2 pi divided by 4 pi, because I've told you that's what the period is. So if you punch into your calculator, what's 2 pi divided by 4 pi? 0.5. Now, that is a fantastic little diploma exam multiple choice question. Okay? And I promise you, one of the choices will be 3 sine 4 pi x plus 0.7. Because you'll just take that 4 pi and plunk it in for the b value. No, you have to calculate it. The other choices will have the 7 here and the 3 here. They'll swap the a and the d in case you're getting confused. Now, what makes that such a good diploma exam question is you can either do it or you can't. You can't fake your way through. You can't punch anything into your calculator. You can't just, use process of elimination. You do it or you can't. Straight up. Okay. So what about this guy? Amplitude of 5. So we start off with 5. Sine midline of -2. So it went down 2, so it's going to be a -2 on the end. So same thing, we're looking for the b value. This is b. So it's 2 pi divided by the period. The period is just 0.5. Radians is just like units, it's like centimeters. It's just a unit, okay? So punch into your calculator. So if we want the exact answer, you would go 2 divided by 0.5. So you would write 4 pi. If you want the approximate answer, you plug the whole thing in on your calculator and you get out 12.56. Okay. How will you know which one to do? Look at the choices. If they have a pi there, it means they didn't hit it. If they just have a decimal there, it means they did hit it. There's really no skill involved in that. You just got to look at the choices. But again, you either do it or don't. They're Hail Mary questions. Now, let's say you know A and D. So you know A goes first and D goes last. So if they've monkeyed with those two numbers, like swap them in place, could you eliminate a couple choices based on that? Yes. But will it still help you find the right answer? No, you have to know how to do B and period. That's why they test it, because it's a guaranteed, you're going to have for sure 2 or 3 marks of your diploma be on B and period, which is a huge amount of marks. When you consider it, like how many days we spend on it, 2 or 3 marks out of 32, it's like 8%. That's the difference between getting an 82 and a 74. No, 70. Yeah, sorry, I can't do math. Okay, that's a big difference. It's like between getting a 58 and a 50, just by knowing that one concept. It can make a huge difference. I like to refer to it as death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? Like if you don't know all the little bits will catch you. If you know the big bits and the little bits, you'll ace it. Formula sheet. Yeah. So the formula on the formula sheet is this one. So you just have to know that you can swap those around. It's a 2-for-1 formula. Yeah, but it's on the formula sheet. You just got a lot of kids came out of the diploma last semester and they were like, "Oh, I forgot to look at the formula sheet." They thought they had forgotten that they could look at it and not realize, like, remember the unit on exponents and logs, and we did all of that was converting between exponents and logs. That formula is on the formula sheet. You don't have to have it memorized at all. You guys pretty much had it memorized because we did it 4,000 times, but it's on the formula sheet. You just have to remember to look at it. Okay. Okay. So what if we have something with decimals? Don't freak out. Okay. So this is at the top of page 383. So it says consider the sinusoidal function, blah. And again, for some reason, a lot of kids saw those decimals and they went, "Oh, no, it doesn't matter. It's the placement of those numbers." So the first thing that you see, what's the first number that you see? It's always going to be the amplitude. Okay. The last number that you see is going to be the midline. So I'm just going to take and come down to part C, as I like to think with a picture. That's how my brain works, and that's what I'm going to stick with. So the midline is going to be y equals -7.5. So down here at -7.5, there's my halfway line. And then from that, I'm going to go up and down 5.77. Okay, so I would crack a calculator at this point. So hold on, let's just finish this off and then I'll give you your break since we're in the flow here. So -7.5 plus 5.77 is negative 1.73. And then negative 7.5 minus 5.77 is negative 13.27. Swoop. Okay. Now, technically, that swoop is wrong. How come? I've got it starting at 0, but this one's got a stupid phase shift. So phase shift just means it would start at 14.35, not at 0, but we don't care about that, right? It just, bleh, okay, just don't worry about it. So the maximum is at negative 1.73. The minimum is negative 13.27. If you bring those concepts together, you will get the range. So bottom, so this is always the bottom. This is always the top.
Meeting will be tomorrow at lunch in the conference room. And please have the following students to the office: Brooklyn Stanley, Cody Vaughn, Tony Peters. Any students who are missing your keychain or your tassel and cap, grab and come get them in the office.
So finally for period is 2 pi over b. And by the way, this question was right here. I just put it down here for space. So what's my b value? What's the number in front of the x? 20.28. So if you punch into your calculator, 2 times pi divided by 20.28, what do you get? It's going to be 0 point something. Okay, so 0.31. Okay, so that means from start to finish, this only takes 0.31 space from start to finish. So again, fractions and decimals are nothing to freak out over. It just means you're going to have to use your calculator instead of just using your brain. Okay. Okay, let's give you a break because we're going to do one more type of question. And that is we'll leave the trickiest one here, which is just given the graph, and then you have to find the equation. But when you come back from the break here, we'll have to do that. Okay, so this one is on page 383. Okay, so what we're going to do, okay, and again, I don't know if this is too hard. I think this question is kind of a little bit beyond Math 30-2, but it's in the booklet. We'll make our way through it. We're all good. Okay? So here's how we're going to do this. So there's 3 types of questions, okay? Option number 1 is I'm going to give you the equation and ask you for all the stuff. So here, let me just back up here. So option number 1 is I give you the equation, you give me all the stuff. Okay? Option number 2 is I give you the stuff, you find me the equation. That's option number 2. Option number 3 is I give you the graph and you give me the equation and the stuff and everything. Okay? So there's a specific order we want to do this in. Just the same order as before. You want to do the midline first. You want to do the amplitude second. And you want to do the period. You want to leave this one till the last. Now don't worry about that plus pi over 6. Okay, that's just the phase shift. It means nothing to us. Okay, well, it kind of means something, but blah, blah, blah. It's fine. Okay. Okay, so look at your top, look at your bottom. So when I say midline first, amplitude second, you're actually going to do them simultaneously in your brain. Okay, it's fine. How far is it from 1 to -5? How much distance is that? 6, right? If I divide that in half, what do I get? 3. So if you come 3 down from the top and 3 up from the bottom, you land at -2. Now, take a step back with your eyes. Does that line that I just drew in, does it separate it into equal size peaks and valleys? Yes. So if it doesn't, like if for example, you end up drawing your line here, that should show you, whoa, I have done something wrong. That is not equally divided. So when you do it right, it will look pleasing to your eye. So we can see that the midline is at -2. So we're going to have a -2 for the midline. And we can also see that we're going up 3 and down 3. So the amplitude is 3, half the total distance. Now, if this is a long answer question on the diploma or my test, you would get 2 marks out of 3 because you have found 2 of the 3 letters. You found D, you found A. All we've got left to do now is find B. Okay? Okay. I want to draw your eyes to the scale of this question. So take a look at your x-axis here. Do you see right here you've got a 1 pi? But it is separated into 3 ticks. That means each tick counts for a third, right? Yes? Okay. You can start counting. You can figure out how long your period is, starting at any point and finishing at any point. Here's what I mean. I'm just going to erase some of the junk that I've got on here. We've practiced that sine starts on the midline, finishes on the midline, right? We've talked about that. So you could be like, okay, here's the start of my wave. It goes swoop, swoop, swoop. So you could just focus on that part. So count how many jumps those two things are apart. Each jump counts for 1/3. Ready? So listen to my words. 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 thirds is how many jumps they are apart. 12 thirds. Does that make sense? Now, just stick the pi back in. So my period is 4 pi because 12 divided by 3 is 4. So now I need to find the b value. 2 pi over period. If you punch that into your calculator, you're going to get out 0.5x. And then just rewrite in that plus pi over 6. Now, I want to show you something. For some reason with sine, the number one thing kids forget is that sine starts on the midline and finishes on the midline. For some reason, they just forget that, which is fine because it's not the end of the world, actually. So what I suggest, and I'm just going to erase what I've got up here, but I'm going to show you another way to see this. Do you see a peak to peak? Could you make that the pattern that you're using, right? Peak to peak, peak to peak, peak to peak, right? That's your periodic. Look what happens. 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 thirds. You get out the exact same thing. So it doesn't matter where you actually start and finish, as long as you cover one entire cycle. That's all that counts. This plus pi over 6 is that if we were actually using the proper sine wave, if we were using this guy, do you see how it's not starting at 0? It's been shifted off. That's that plus pi over 6. But it means nothing. Okay? So there's your amplitude. This is the midline. And then the B value is how we calculate it right here. Right. You just go 2 pi divided by 4 pi, and when I punched that into my calculator, I got out 0.5. Okay. The diploma is going to show it in its simplified form. Okay. So Morgan, if this was the diploma question, so say this was a long answer, and you wrote B as 2 pi over 4 pi, because that equals exactly 0.5, they shouldn't take off any marks for it. If it was a multiple choice question, one of the choices won't be 2 pi over 4 pi. You will only see 0.5 as an option. Okay. Okay. So that's the worst that this unit gets. That's it. Because tomorrow, all we've got to do is button pushing using an L1 and an L2. That's it. So I handed out a second piece of paper to you today. It has got 4 questions on it. So what I thought we would do, oh, hold on, before we do that, here's the assignment. So just go in and just circle what you need to circle. So I'll probably just do number 9 with you just to give you a little shove in the right direction. Okay. Or number 8, it doesn't matter because they're all the same. Okay, but go ahead and try those questions once I get you going through these 4 examples here today. So I gave you out this piece of paper. It has got 4 questions on it. Okay, so the first 2, I've given you the graph and I want you to find me all the stuff. The next one I gave you the equation and I want you to find me the stuff. And the last one, I've given you the graph and I want you to find me the equation. So I'm going to hit pause on the video and I want you to try those 4 questions, okay? And then we'll go through the answers together. Okay. So usually I almost always do the midline first, okay? So make sure you're paying attention to scale. I always put the numbers on here. So I'm counting by 0.5s. So the top of this thing is at 2.5. The bottom of this thing is at negative 2.5. So because it goes up and down to the same number, that means automatically the midline has to be at 0 because it hasn't moved up or down any. So from the midline, it goes up 2.5 and down 2.5, so the amplitude is 2.5. The period, okay, so from start to finish, so it starts here, it goes up, down, up, so the length of the cycle is the period. So the period is 6 pi. Not the b value. The period is 6 pi. Now, domain we really haven't talked too much about. Why is this not? That's odd. So it goes on forever in each direction. So the domain is just going to be x is real. And then the range, bottom to top. So the bottom is negative 2.5. The top is positive 2.5. Okay? You okay? That's the strangest thing. Okay. Okay. So same thing, but this time the midline has shifted. So the midline is through that 1. Now again, if you couldn't find that, if I didn't draw that on there, you would see that the top is 4 and the bottom is -2. So it's covered a total distance of 6, from -2 up to 4. So half of that is 3. So if you go 3 up from the bottom and 3 down from the top, you will end up at 1. Also visually, like if you just even get a ruler, if you hold a ruler across the graph and stop once you visually see that it's half and half, that's all you need to do. So the amplitude is 3, midline is 1. Period. So from start to finish, it took 2 pi. So period is 2 pi. Domain, she goes forever. Range, bottom, top. So -2 to 4. Most kids have an easier time going from the graph to the stuff than going from the stuff to the graph. Like it tends to be kind of a one-way street. Oh, now the buttons are working. Okay. So what if you have the equation? Now be careful here. Amplitude, +3. Amplitude is the distance, so it's always going to be a positive answer. Okay? So one of the choices might be -3. That is not a correct choice. Midline is going to be 4 because the +4 on the end. Domain is always going to be x is real. What I suggest you do for range is just kind of draw a quick sketch. This thing is going to go up at 4. It's the midline. It's going to go up 3 and down 3. So the top is at 7, the bottom is at 1. So the range is from 1 to 7. So I almost always do range with a picture, almost always. And then period, the formula is 2 pi over b. B is 3. So you can either leave it as 2 pi over 3, or if you punch it into your calculator, you'll get like 1 point something. Yes, yes, yes. So when you're doing the approximate, you plug it in exactly as it appears. The whole kit and caboodle. 2.09? Oh, okay. 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 Well, and it's not even a guarantee that you have to even do that. You might just have to leave it as 2 pi over 3. So, yeah. Okay, last one here. Okay, so this is the hardest stuff we do. Okay, so I always start with the midline first. So I can see that my midline here, just visually, 5 divides it in half. Because I've got 2 now above it and 2 down below it. So +5 is here, up 2, down 2. That's my amplitude. Okay. How long is the pattern? Okay, so it doesn't matter if you go from peak to peak or from start to finish. So if you go from peak to peak, it went from 1 to 5. So how far is that? 4. If you go from here, up, down, up, 4. Right? So it doesn't matter where you look, you're going to get out 4. So the period is 4. Not 4 pi, just 4. It's just 4. So the b value, because this is the b, it's 2 pi divided by 4. So you can either leave this, it's half a pi, or you can punch it into your calculator and you get 1.57. The b value is the nasty one. Okay. Okay, so tomorrow's just an L1, L2 kind of day. This was the big lesson today. And it's your last big one for the course. Okay, we got one lesson left of Math 30-2, which is tomorrow. And tomorrow, at some point this week, I will hand out all the year-end review stuff to you. and kind of show you what you need to do to move through it. Okay,